Hey guys. Okay, so some of you would have seen the post that I put up on social media earlier this week, thanking everyone that was involved in the construction pricing presentation that I did on Tuesday. Now, if you saw that post, you would have seen that possibly one of my biggest takeaways was that we as design-related professionals have an opportunity here to positively contribute to the whole conversation that's going on about construction price increases. So we have the ability to have informed conversations with our clients to take some of the fear out of the whole discussion. And in turn, most importantly, to take some heat off the builders out there. Because I think most of the time, the builders out there are unfairly copping a lot of extra pressure when it comes to these price increases. People tend to jump to the conclusion that builders are ripping them off and builders aren't doing their jobs. And I think that's totally unfair. And unfortunately, we are all hearing the stories at the moment of builders who feel like they've run out of options and they just crack under the pressure, and that just does not need to happen. So I thought I need to walk the talk instead of, what is the saying? Walk the walk instead of talk the talk. You know what I'm trying to say here. Basically, I need to live up to what I'm saying and use our weekly video to try and build some awareness over this whole issue. So the presentation basically started by looking at what exact factors have driven the increases until now. So pre-COVID to the current point in time. Now I looked at it from two different angles. Firstly, material side of things, and then the build and construction side of things. So we had Jason from Brett's talking about the material aspect, and then we had Ben from Spencer Constructions talking about the build or construction side of things. So I thought, hey, this week, why don't we focus just on the material drivers? Next week, if all goes to plan, I'll do a video talking about the build or construction drivers. Then maybe we'll look to the future and go, okay, that's what's happened to get us to this point, but what's on the horizon? What's going to change between now and let's say 6 or 12 months down the track? We'll see how we go. I might change things up. Anyway, got my presentation notes here. So I thought I'd just talk through everything that I'd kind of raised, but more importantly, the information that Jason from the material side of things was giving back to me, because he threw some definite gems at me that I had not considered that stuff. So I would probably say, if I had to break it down, there's 3 contributing factors here, or key contributing factors. First one's bushfires. That was the bushfire season we had in 2019, 2020. Next would be COVID. And then last but not least, I broke them down into points just before. Alternate pathways, no. Oh, I've just demand. So obvious. I've scribbled so many notes here. I'm like, I can't even read my own notes. But demand. So yeah, we've got bushfires, COVID, and increased demand. Let's break them down. So first and foremost, back in 2019, 2020, we had the massive bushfires all across Australia. Now, I think Jason said that at that point in time, so pre-COVID, 60 to 70% of our timber stock was sourced locally. So it was grown here in Australia. Now, those fires wiped out a whopping 130,000 hectares of our plantation stock. So we just in an instant lost not only the mature stock that was about to be felled, but the intermediate stock that was sort of growing that would come to fruition in a few years to come, and then the new growth sort of stock that would come to the market later down the track. So we just lost that all in a heartbeat. Now, that was obvious, but Jason threw something at me that I went, wow, didn't know that one. He basically said that there was a lot of stock that had been felled, which was sitting in these factories ready to go out to market. The factory owners or manufacturers were panicking, going, oh my goodness, we've got these bushfires coming. What do? Let's just discount our stock, get it off the shelves, get it out there, and at least get some money for this stock. So it meant that a lot of the stuff that had already been cut up and was ready to be used just got flushed to market at really discounted prices. So that was another thing you need to consider. Now, obviously, Business 101, people sit there and they go, okay, we've got to make up some money here, not because we're trying to be greedy, but because we need to stay viable to ensure that we have a business going into the future. So that naturally pushed people to increase prices on the stock that they did have remaining. More importantly, though, it forced people to look for alternate sources. So I mentioned before, 60 to 70% of our stock was locally sourced. It then forced builders and other people out there to try and find alternate material sources all around the world. Now, obviously, alternate sources, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but alternate sources typically mean more touch points. So one of the examples Jason gave me was he's recently had a container that went from Russia via rail to China. It was then hand unpacked and then repacked into a new container, and then it was sent via ship from China to Australia. That container alone cost $25,000 just to get the container here. So the point I'm trying to make here is our traditional methods, which were they still had multiple touch points along the way, but our traditional methods, which were really refined and cost effective, suddenly went out the door, and we have to look at alternate methods which aren't as cost effective, which have more touch points, which are non-standard, which all means dollars, dollars, dollars. So, the next point he made, which again was one of those ones where did not think about that. He said post fires, people were forced to fell and therefore process damaged timber stock. So trees that had been damaged to some degree by these fires. That meant that the factories and the machinery within these factories were processing damaged goods, which were then leading to wear and tear on the machines, etc., which means people are being forced to maintain or do the maintenance stuff on these machines more frequently and replace these machines more frequently. So it wasn't just that immediate loss of timber that was the biggest issue. We're now seeing ongoing issues which are driving up prices because these factories are being forced to churn more money to be able to stay functional. Okay, so that's probably the first point. Now we're going to move to COVID. So there's probably two key points I want to make here. Firstly, lockdowns and then ISO. So during the early days, we were obviously both here in Australia and globally, everyone was being forced into lockdowns. So that meant there weren't the staff on the floors, so to speak, producing the materials. Now, the bigger issue is probably the isolations, the fact that the minute you get sick, it's not like me. Most of you who watch our social media would know that a couple of weeks ago I had COVID. So me, sure, I wasn't feeling great, but I could drag my sorry backside out of bed and I could do a couple of hours a day at least in the first couple of days. And then after the first few days, I was like, nah, I'm back to work, I can do this. So I could continue to work for the majority of my isolation period. Physical labor sort of related jobs, they don't have that luxury. They can't stay from home and work. So you've got all these people these days that can't go to work, can't manufacture. Now that is leading to a massive backlog. So backlog that started way back in the beginning of the early lockdown days of COVID. Now that combined with demand, let me just make sure I'm going on my right path here because I think there was another point I wanted to make. Shipping. We're going to talk about shipping first before I jump to demand. So shipping problems. Early in the days, basically, the ship owners were pulling all their boats and stuff off the water because they were worried that they basically didn't know what was going to happen. So they were worried all these ships were going to be stuck out at sea, incurring massive holding costs. So they dramatically reduced the fleet of ships available to be able to ship containers around the world. Obviously, as we now know, demand increased. It wasn't necessary, but back then no one had any idea what was going to happen. So that meant that in combination with the fact that when the ships got here in Australia, they weren't going back because everywhere else in the world was in lockdown. No one needed our raw materials to be able to manufacture. So we didn't have the containers going back the other way. That meant that there was an excess of containers sitting here in Australia. So a combination of limited ships and limited containers availability wise meant that people basically got into this bidding war. So everyone was competing for these containers and trying to get materials here to Australia. Now, my mum has a wholesale business. She imports terracotta pots, furniture, all that sort of stuff, basically homewares, coming out of China. She said to me in the early days, so pre-COVID, they'd get a container out of China for $2,100 USD, maybe up to $2,600 USD. At the peak of COVID, they were paying $9,600 USD to be able to get a container from China to Australia because they were just being forced to outbid people just to get the goods here. Now, I thought that was pretty good numbers. Like when I say good, scary sort of numbers, dramatic numbers. But talking to Jason, he said that they've just had a container that cost them $15,000. Now, that doesn't go back to the 25 grand I talked about earlier, but just generally speaking, 15 grand for them to get containers here. I was like, damn, that's a lot of money. So yeah, basically leading to a bidding war. People, and again, the pressures from everyone using different alternative sources means that people are using routes and shipping methods that they're not used to using. All of this common theme, prices going up. Now we go back to demand, the big one. So number one, bushfires. Number two, COVID issues, all naturally increasing demand. But then we decided to go and throw some stimulus packages out there. Now those stimulus packages weren't just here in Australia. Pretty much every single Western country out there took some political action to be able to try and stimulate growth because they thought the world was going to end. That combined with travel money, so people like myself who usually travel overseas at least one time a year, we suddenly couldn't go overseas. So we had all this excess cash burning holes in our pockets. And we're like, well, what do we do with it? Well, let's go and improve our home living situation. We're stuck at home in lockdowns. Let's improve our houses and make our lives prettier that way and more satisfactory and better that way. And then last but not least, more recently, the floods. Those three things in particular just kicked the demand issue into overdrive and just things went crazy. Now, another factor I just wrote down here, low unemployment. So the fact that we had this huge demand, the fact that at the moment we've got low unemployment rates, just meant that businesses out there were being forced to get into bidding wars, or are still being forced to get into bidding wars for staff. So, and they're also being forced to pay premiums to be able to get people to work overtime. So you go, okay, we need more staff on the floor to be able to to increase our production to catch up. We also need them to work overtime to catch up on production. Okay, we've got to pay them a premium. So that's just pushing the labour through the roof. Okay, I think that was everything. I'm just going to quickly scan my notes. Yep. Okay, so that's the key points. Like I said, we got bushfires. There's a few different issues there. We got COVID, which again created a few different issues, including shipping issues. And then we had increased demand. All three of those key factors came together and just meant that our material prices went through the roof. Now, what I would like to do is throw it out there to everyone to say this is not going to be a comprehensive or complete summary of all the issues that relate to material price increases. So I would love it if people can add comments below on any additional factors that they've seen, heard, considered, so that we can drive this conversation, broaden this conversation, and like I said at the beginning, most importantly, help people understand exactly what factors are driving it so that the builders don't unfairly cop that blame, and we don't have people jumping to conclusions and placing the blame on the builders, because we just don't need that at the moment. Okay, I think that covers off everything I want to talk about. Like I said, next week we'll focus more on the build construction side of things, what information Ben had to share with me, and then maybe we'll look to the future. We'll see where this goes. Until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got three. Number one, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site-specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number two, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number three, what was my number three? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all.